Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 21 of
Don't Die
Die
Dumb.
Dumb. I want to start today by addressing a question and also bringing up a subject. DEI. What does that stand for?
So we talked about DEI last time, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And DEI is probably the flashpoint for a lot of the anti-woke sentiment that drove fascists into power. Last time I talked about the idea that ethnic preference, or any kind of minority preference, any preference for anything other than competence will come at some cost in competence. So if we favor people who wear polka dots, or we disfavor people who are gay or something, all of those things have nothing to do with their competence at whatever job they're being hired for or whatever university they're being admitted to. And that is true. And somebody wrote in and said, well, any kind of preference is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Not exactly unconstitutional, but close enough. The problem is this. I talked about the very real criticism that reverse discrimination comes at a cost of competence, but I didn't stick the landing, which is that the real huge discrimination at a huge cost in competence has been the huge bias in favor of white males from the very beginning of the country. If we preferentially exclude any group, I don't care if it's because they're gay and you don't like gay people, I don't care if you don't like gay people, or black or female or the wrong religion or they have an accent, all of those things don't have to do with competence. And the bigger the bias, the bigger the hit in competence. And the biggest bias in our country from day one has always been in favor of white males, which means we've had a system that allows white males to get jobs at a much lower level of competence than a woman or a minority or some other discriminated group would have achieved. A lot of people argue on that basis that we need reverse discrimination to fix the problem. I do not argue that because I think reversing bias still endorses the idea of bias. But in terms of the harm that DEI has done, it can have a disproportionate effect on two different populations. So increased rates of admission for previously marginalized groups can be as high as 40 or 50%, and yet the decreased likelihood that I as a white male would get admitted or hired is only in the 2% range. So a tiny hit on a group that has always, I was going to say benefited, but it doesn't benefit any of us to make the country weaker by not sorting for competence. And in fact, if I started a company tomorrow, the first thing I would do is hire every woman I could find because they have not been allowed to fully express their competence. So I'm going to get super talent that other companies have left on the table.
Let me say this. Most people don't get this, they don't get it because it's not publicized much, but the biggest form of DEI in the nation is for poor people. I got a grant to go to college. You can get a full grant, partial grant. You can get work study, which I also got when I was in trade school. And the idea is the same as DEI. It's just helping poor people. Nobody's against that, and why not?
So most industrialized countries now do have free college tuition for people that make some academic cut. I can tell you, I've talked with a lot of academics in our country who either don't want that at all, people should pay for their own education because they're going to make a profit from their degree, or there should be no competency test at all because that will exclude some groups. First of all, that assumes that some groups are inherently less competent. What they're really getting at, though, is people who didn't grow up in a house with professional parents or with lots of books and things like that. Those are all things we can offset, we can fix in different ways. But the notion that we shouldn't have competency testing to get into university is one that I personally disagree with. But I will tell you, I think I'm in an academic minority on this.
Now we're going to switch gears, go into our next subject, which was actually a question. What are the signs of addiction? And people are addicted to many things. I'm addicted. I love coffee in the morning. These things And so many people, they have a drink when they get out of work at night. But they are addicted whether they know it or not. Some people are addicted to music. The minute they get on, they hit that. So some addictions, I don't think are that bad. When somebody tells me, all my kid does is play video games, I say, well, he could be out shooting smack or taking fentanyl. There are a lot worse things, but comparing the lesser of two evils, is that where we're at? And more importantly, let's get back to the question, what are the signs?
That is actually a much, much better question than you might guess on first hearing it. Well, we all know what addiction is. No, we actually don't. There's a lot of different schemas for this, but there are some general principles, and I think they will answer your question. So there's two levels we could think about it on. One is physiologic. One of the things that happens in addiction is that your dopamine functions get tied to one particular kind of stimulus, and the sad thing is they get suppressed for other kinds of stimulus. So once you're addicted to, say, heroin, your children aren't as important to you, not only not as important as heroin, but not as important as they were before you got addicted to heroin. The high you get from heroin is the only high you can get, or at least the only one of that intensity. And your children that you used to take great pleasure in don't interest you as much anymore. Look at any meth house that has kids in it, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That's something we could actually measure, but it requires laboratory kind of equipment and stuff like that. More commonly, and addiction can be to things other than substances because it has to do with the rewiring of the dopamine circuits in the brain. So we can get addicted to things like gambling and porn and, yes, music or video games, all kinds of things. So how do we know if we're addicted? Well, I think a more useful definition is at the behavioral level. If you're thinking, I know I have this work to do, but I just got to play another hour of my video game, you could be heading into addiction. And if that's happening consistently, if you're falling behind in your work, your job's at risk, or your grades at school are at risk, or your relationships are at risk, but you just can't stop playing the video game because you know you'll get your dopamine hit from that, and you don't know if you'll have a good day at work, or you don't know if you'll have a good date with your, whoever you're dating. If that starts happening consistently, then you are addicted. One thing you hear a lot is, well, I can't be addicted because I don't drink all week long. I just binge on the weekends. Yeah, but if that's damaging your life, that is an addiction. And if you have said to yourself, I wish I could stop eating donuts because, I'm getting fat, right? But you can't stop eating those donuts, and you have a food addiction. So addiction is when your craving for the thing gets in the way of things that are more important to you but less gratifying.
Let me say that food addictions are very prevalent in the United States today. Obesity is at, I think, 45%.
No, higher than that.
Is it higher than that
around
now?
70 now.
70%?
It's pretty high, yeah.
And we always talk about other cultures. Well, the Romans deserve to be defeated. They're all fat and lazy. Well,
they had it coming. They were fat.
Yeah, but let me tell you this. Overcoming food addictions is so unbelievably hard. You get bored, you eat food. You get scared. If you take a dog and scare it, it will go over and lap up water out of its water bowl. It's a reaction to things in many ways, a reaction to many things. If you're overweight, I feel for you. I was always 20 pounds overweight almost my entire life. After I had cancer, a very serious cancer, I would go by, because I would pick up a candy bar at the gas station or in the convenience mart, whatever it be. All of a sudden I started saying to myself, well, just wait till you get home. You can do it, just wait. And that broke me of it. But I'm telling you, it's so hard to overcome. So I feel for you. I'm not putting you down. I know how hard it is.
There are also food neuromarketers, whose job is to get you addicted to food. We know that certain patterns of sugar, salt, and fat will trigger responses in our brain that look very much analogous to the triggers of people who are addicted to cocaine or heroin when they see their drug. So some of this is being done to you. Some of it might be changes in the microbiome. There are at least some people who, if they eat the same number of calories as Pete and I, will gain more weight than either of us would. But there still is a basic physics, calories in, calories out. If you're someone who would gain more weight than I would on 2,000 calories, that doesn't mean you're doomed to be obese. It means you need to eat less than 2,000 calories. But you can only push that lever so far, because if you eat too little, your metabolism slows down and you wind up gaining more fat than you would at a higher level. So a much better strategy is to tweak your metabolism by being more active. There are a lot of articles published criticizing exercise for weight loss on the grounds that it doesn't burn enough calories. That's true. I would have to row for about an hour to pay for 2 candy bars. But that is not where the gold is. The gold is in raising your overall metabolism. It's our resting metabolic rate that largely determines how many calories we can get away with. And if you're active in general, and that can mean just getting up out of your chair and walking around every 15 or 20 minutes. If you can raise your metabolism by being generally more active, that will allow you to burn more calories. Now, you want to be careful because your appetite will also increase as you do that. So you need to track the foods you eat. Not necessarily count every calorie, but track the foods at least, while you're increasing your activity level if you want a net gain on this. Until GLP-1s came along, we had no reliable strategies for combating obesity, and a lot of obesity researchers were throwing in the towel. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's not the patient's fault. It's inevitable. But something changed in the last 2 generations, and I think I am not ready to throw in the towel on obesity research. The other thing is, it does not help at all to fat shame people. If you make them upset and depressed and socially isolated, you're just driving them toward comfort foods. Yeah. And there is something about you that we could shame, I promise. There is something about each of us that we don't really want other people pointing a finger at and laughing at. So it doesn't mean we should obesity normalize, because the health consequences of that are real and significant. I'm sorry, but the people who say that there's not a health consequence are simply wrong. It is true there are some people who are metabolically pretty fit, even though they are visually obese, but it is not true that there's not a statistical correlation between obesity and illness. Let me say that in plainer English. Obesity is associated with chronic, significant medical problems that will deteriorate the quality of our life. So we don't want that, but shaming people isn't how we get around it. So what ground is there between fat shaming and fat normalizing? And the ground is fitness encouraging. If you're just waggling your finger at somebody and calling them names, you're just an asshole. But if you're inviting them to go to the gym with you or go on walks with you, you're actually helping them. So maybe be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
No, I find walks terribly boring. I had a friend who was obese. Didn't see him for a year. I saw him a year later, and he was slimmed down tremendously. And I asked him, how'd you do it? He said this: I like to go out for coffee. I also like to go out for lunch. So I parked 6 blocks away from my coffee shop and 6 blocks away from the restaurant. So unknowingly, I was walking 2 miles a day. And after I started doing it, after 2 months, I had more energy, so I started doing more things. So there are little things you can do, you can figure out that might help. Mind you, don't park 6 blocks from the bakery or the bar. Park 6 blocks from something that's not quite so harmful to you. Our next subject. Somebody wrote in and said, you claim, and now the Democrats are claiming, that I shouldn't wear masks. The Democrats want this out of the budget. No mask, judicial warrants before you enter someone's home.
Oh, we're talking about ice masks.
Yes.
Okay.
And no mask, judicial warrants, and body cams. I don't see anything wrong with this. But our viewer said, you can't take the mask away from ICE because they'll get death threats from left-wing radicals.
So it is absolutely true that if you have stormtrooper squads wandering through cities without masks, people will take umbrage. But if your response is that we need SWAT teams with zero accountability and no warrants to deal with, in fact, I have a list here of exactly who they're arresting. So where are undocumented workers found? Construction laborers and trades workers. So you might think, well, great, round those guys up because they're taking my job. But you know what? If you can't pull together a full construction team, nobody gets any work because you can't take the job. if you can't pull together a good auto mechanic shop with all the correct laborers in it, and boy, nobody can do auto mechanics like the people who do cruisers, right? Well, then nobody gets any work. So that is false. Agricultural and crop workers, yeah, let's send SWAT teams out there to get those pregnant women and children that are picking strawberries. They look pretty dangerous to me. We better mask them and put bulletproof vests on them so they won't have any accountability. Now think for a minute, if you live in a democracy and you think the people who do law enforcement shouldn't have any accountability, I guess every policeman should be masked, and for that matter, every politician should be masked. And the decisions they make should be anonymous, because we don't want them to have accountability. In fact, Pete and I should be masked because it's not like we don't get our share of hate mail, right? So that is just dumb. The idea that ICE should have masks because otherwise they would be accountable. No, what ICE should do is go back to what they did before Trump and go after criminals so the whole community doesn't hate them, rather than swarming into schools and factories.
Let me point this out. When ICE was in California, they didn't go to the gang-infested areas. They didn't attack the Crips. They didn't attack the Bloods. When they were in Arizona, they didn't attack the cartels. What are they doing? They don't take on anybody their own size.
Right.
They like to go to grade schools, preschools.
Daycare workers.
Yeah.
Let's see who else
the
they're
elderly.
rounding up. Let's see, administrative support, miscellaneous services. So that woman on the phone helpline, good thing they got her. She looked dangerous to me. Retail trade workers. So, that person that sold you your last coat, good thing they got that terrorist out of here. Transportation workers, bus drivers, Uber drivers. Oh, thank God we're rounding them up. But you need SWAT teams to do that, right? Because they're pretty dangerous. Now, if the rationale is criminal behavior, we actually already have police. And in fact, if you want SWAT teams that go after gangs, I'm all for it. Go after the gangs with SWAT teams. But why single out immigrants who are not the most likely gang members? Go after gangs if gangs are the problem. This is a general problem-solving error that we make, which is we go after what are, in science we call these secondary markers. If you're associating immigrants with gangs and gangs with crime, then you go after immigrants to go after crime. No, that's a secondary marker. While many people who commit crimes are in gangs, and many people in gangs are immigrants, it doesn't work the other way that most immigrants are in gangs. That's a false equivalency. Consider this. The vast majority of white male chauvinists are men. But hopefully the vast majority of men are not white male chauvinists.
Now, when a woman gets raped, if she goes to trial, quite often the defense attorney will make her look guilty. He'll do his best to pick apart her personality. And what we're seeing with ICE right now is when they do something wrong, automatically the person they wronged is a domestic terrorist. People with Petty had no criminal record whatsoever. He was an intensive care nurse. He was a Boy Scout growing up. Yet they picked apart his personality. They also attacked Good because she was a lesbian. Being a lesbian is not criminal.
This is from Birmingham. This is the kind of stuff that costs conservatives a big chunk of their power. And if they want to discredit themselves again, let's do more of this.
Now, let me say this. I hear Amy Schumer, different people, celebrities, are leaving the country. I think that's BS, and I'll tell you why. You should stay here and fight for your country. If you believe in your country, stay here and fight. People have said to me, you're an actor, you have done comedy for 35 years, you're going to lose half your audience. Well, okay, my country's more important than my career. For these people to just leave, you're going to run away? Come on. Have some backbone. Stay and fight with the rest of us. And by fight, I don't mean anything violent. I just mean work toward a better America.
And speaking of fighting for your country, I do consider myself a patriot. But I don't use that word because most of the people who use the word patriot sound like this to me. I love my country. I love it so much I'd die for it. I mean, I don't like black people, but I love my country. I mean, not women. They should be subordinate to men, and they're not giving me all the sex I want. But I love my country. Well, not the Jews, right? Or the Catholics, for God's sake, or the Quakers, let alone atheists. But I love my country. Not the gay people, not the trans people, but I love my country. I love the Constitution so much. Well, I mean, not the part about equal rights, and not the part about free and fair elections, and not the part about accountability to the public, but otherwise I love my... If only we replaced the constitutional democracy we have with the Project 2025 theocracy, well, then I'd love my country. I love my country if only it were a completely different country. That's what patriotism means to me.
Yeah, that's so disingenuous. Our next subject. Someone said, why are species important? We don't need dinosaurs anymore. We are getting along fine without them. We know that the president wants to get rid of the Endangered Species Act. Why would species be important? Let me give you an example. In the 1970s, the American Farm Bureau got the bright idea that you could grind up cattle bones and meat that we couldn't eat and feed it back to cattle. That despite the fact that cannibals in South America,
Jakob Creutzfeldt disease.
yes, they said that they get the laughing disease. They would only let warriors and the very elderly eat human flesh because they got the laughing disease, then they couldn't walk, and then they would die. Warriors expected to die anyhow, and the very elderly, they presumed they would die soon. Despite that, despite knowing that, and I used to know Cecil Miller, the head of the Farm Bureau. Holy moly. I don't want to slander the guy, but boy, a more selfish, non-caring person I've rarely ever met. Well, the mad cow disease from that came to Europe, then Canada, then Northwestern America. And they had no cure for it. It was ready to spread throughout the world with no cure whatsoever. And what they found was they needed some type of serum or whatever from a cow that was living.
Oh, antibodies.
Yeah, antibodies. There were 30 types of this cow left in the world, in Vietnam, that hadn't been killed off by Agent Orange or whatever. 30 of them. They found it, and that cured the disease. That stopped it. Without that, we would have probably lost half the population of the world. That's how important every species is.
I actually think we might have done this riff before, but I'll repeat it because it's the answer to this half the answer to this question. And that is, the yew tree has a bark, and in that bark there's a chemical, and that chemical turned out to be the breakthrough that reduced breast cancer from a 90% mortality rate to a 90% cure rate. Why would the yew tree have a chemical that fights breast cancer in human women? Well, it's because cancer is a universal problem. They have to solve the same problems we do. They have to extract energy from the environment. They have to fight off microbes. They have to deal with cancer. They're constantly exposed to ultraviolet light. Everything in the plant and animal world has to solve the same biologic problems we do. And all of us wish medicine could solve more of those biological problems, like protecting us from infection and anemia and so forth. So every time a species becomes extinct, all of the solutions that are wrapped up in that species' DNA are lost to us. And it's not just DNA and not just chemical. They have behavioral solutions. For example, the structure of some ant hives allows for passive cooling in hot environments. That stuff we can map directly onto human architecture in cities near the equator or as the climate warms up. So if all you care about is a selfish motive, then the fact that animals represent libraries of engineering solutions to problems we also continually need to solve is a pretty good reason not to let them go extinct. But the implication of the question was, I don't need an elephant, so why do I care if elephants become extinct? Well, I don't need a Japanese person, so why do I care if the Japanese become extinct? I don't need you, the letter writer, so why do I care if you get killed tomorrow? Because part of actually being a moral part of a community of living beings is caring about each other. And if that's too heavy a lift for you, that kind of discredits your comments.
That brings us into our final subject. Person wrote in, when I don't see my relatives for a long time, I get lonely for them. I sometimes just have to get out of the house. And then when I'm out, I will say hi to someone I don't even know because it makes me feel good. Or I'll go to a very public place or restaurant and start a conversation up. But I have friends that don't need anybody. They're totally independent. Do we really need relationships? Is that something we need or just something we crave at times? And is it universal?
So you have friends who don't appear to need anybody. It might not be universal, but there's a pretty good chance your friends need relationships more than they realize they do. Even introverts need to have friends and relationships. And there is abundant evidence that cognitive decline happens earlier and faster if you don't have a good network of relationships. Preservation of cognitive function into old age directly correlates with the quality of your social connectivity. And physical health follows the same pattern. So are there a few people who don't need that and will still live to be 100 with no cognitive decline and in reasonably good physical health? Sure, there might be. There's 10 billion of us. There's probably some real outliers. But are you one of those people? Probably not. You probably need relationships whether or not you acknowledge that you do. And that pattern is quite strong and has been looked at in a bunch of different studies with a bunch of different designs by a bunch of different people over multiple decades. So that's pretty robust science.
Let me tell you this. One thing you can do for people when they call you is when they call you for no reason, they just want to communicate. Try to tell them something good. I have people I call them, hey, how are you doing? Oh, my back. Oh, my bills. Oh, my wife doesn't, blah, blah, blah. And I understand that they want to vent. But before you vent, I have a cousin, Tommy. Tommy's a little, he's unique. And when I get really down, I love talking to Tommy. I give him a call because the first thing he says, oh, Pete, it is such a great day to be alive. I can't believe it. Of course, then he'll say, every day I wake up, I'm getting more handsome. But still, he always, I feel, I call him first. If I'm afraid to talk to someone, I call him first. Gives me confidence, makes me feel good. Maybe you want to do that to other people.
Yeah, to a large degree, we live in the world we choose to notice. So I can remember a time in my life when it rained, I thought, why is it raining? Why is it raining on me? This is such a personal affront to me that it's raining on me. It's getting my books wet and it's making my hair messy, right? But that same rain brings crops and causes flowers to bloom. And I love the smell of the ions in the rain air. In fact, nowadays I open up the house every time it rains and turn on the fans to bring air through the house. Same rain, different attitude. So now I live in a world where rain is pretty great, but I used to live in an attitude where it was pretty unpleasant. In the same way, there are people who just, don't like me. Probably somebody listening right now. And they'll say something mean or insulting or nasty and tell me they don't like me, and I'll be like, great, that's one more person I don't have to sort through. When I'm looking for people I might want to hang out with, you're not on the list. That was helpful to me. Thank you for that. Instead of living in a world full of enemies, I live in a world which is select. So think about the way that your attention literally creates the world that you live in, and then think about how you can optimize that for your own benefit.
Okay, in 1 minute, isn't that a Pollyanna attitude? Oh, everything's, it's raining, but it helps the crops. Oh, I'm broke, but, I'll get money somehow. Isn't that unrealistic? 1 minute.
It's no more unrealistic to notice the good stuff than to notice the bad stuff. But in terms of maintaining your psychological, mental, and physical health, it's a whole lot more useful to notice the good stuff. It is true, actually, that pessimistic people, in some contexts, are a little better at estimating odds of success or failure. But it's also true that optimistic people are significantly more resilient to life stresses.
In college, there was a girl I used to say, how you doing? or, oh, good morning. And she'd go, what's so good about it, huh? She'd always say that to me. And
My household was like that.
one day she was in the cafeteria sitting all alone. I said, how's it going? And she said, nobody hangs around with me. And she couldn't understand it. She was so deep. The poor thing was so depressing to be around, you know. So anyhow, try and stay uplifting if you can, okay? I mean, it's easier said than done, but we can all do it. That concludes our broadcast for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
Remember, don't die
dumb.
dumb.